Maya Chen stood outside the tall black gates of the Blackstone mansion. She looked up at the huge house that seemed to touch the clouds. The building was made of white stone and had more windows than she could count. Golden lights shone from every room. She had never seen anything so big or fancy in her whole life. She checked her phone for the time. It was exactly 5:30 in the evening. Maya did not want to be late for her first day working with Elite Events Catering Company. She needed this job badly. The money would help pay for her last semester at music school. Without it, she would have to quit studying music forever. Maya walked through the gates and up the long driveway. Her feet hurt already from the cheap black shoes she had bought for work. The catering company told all workers to wear black pants, white shirts, and black shoes. Maya had spent almost $50 on the outfit. That was money she did not really have, but she had no choice. As she got closer to the house, she could hear music and voices coming from inside. Through the big windows, she saw people in expensive clothes holding wine glasses. The women wore beautiful dresses that probably cost more than Maya made in a month. The men wore perfect black suits. Everyone looked rich and important. Maya went to the back door where the catering trucks were parked. Other workers were taking boxes of food and supplies into the house. A tall woman with short gray hair came over to Maya. She wore the same black and white uniform as Maya. "You must be Maya Chen," the woman said. "I am Susan, the head server for tonight. This is your first time with Elite Events, right?" Maya nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I am ready to work hard." Susan smiled. "Good. These rich people can be difficult sometimes. Just do what they ask, stay quiet, and everything will be fine. The party is for Mr. Richard Blackstone. He just bought another company and wants to celebrate. There are about 60 guests tonight." Maya followed Susan into the house through the kitchen. The kitchen was bigger than Maya's whole apartment. Shiny metal counters covered every wall. 3 ovens were cooking different foods. The smell of expensive meat and fancy sauces filled the air. "Your job tonight is to serve drinks and take away empty plates," Susan explained. "Always smile. Never talk unless someone asks you a question. And whatever you do not spill anything on these people or their things. Mr. Blackstone does not like mistakes." Maya nodded and picked up a tray of champagne glasses. The glasses were made of crystal and felt fragile in her hands. She had never held anything so expensive before. One glass probably cost more than she made in a day. She walked into the main party room and stopped breathing for a moment. The room was enormous. A huge chandelier hung from the ceiling, throwing light everywhere like diamonds. The walls were covered with paintings that looked like they belonged in a museum. Rich carpet covered the floor, so thick that Maya's feet sank into it. But what caught Maya's attention most was the piano. In the corner of the room sat the most beautiful piano she had ever seen. It was black and shiny, reflecting the light from the chandelier. Maya knew it was a Steinway grand piano, the kind that only the best musicians in the world got to play. Maya had been playing piano since she was 5 years old. Her grandmother had taught her on an old piano that was missing some keys. Later, Maya won a scholarship to music school because she was so good. She dreamed of becoming a professional pianist and playing in concert halls around the world. But 2 months ago, everything changed. Maya's mother got very sick and needed expensive medicine. The family had no money for the treatment. Maya had to quit music school and get a job to help pay the bills. She lost her scholarship and had to find a way to pay for her last semester herself. Looking at the beautiful piano made Maya's heart hurt. She remembered the feeling of playing music, the way her fingers danced on the keys, the way the music seemed to come from deep inside her soul. She had not played piano in 2 months. There was no piano in her small apartment, and she could not afford to rent practice time at the music school anymore. Maya forced herself to look away from the piano. She had work to do. She walked around the room, offering champagne to the guests. Most people took a glass without even looking at her. Some did not say thank you. To them, Maya was invisible, just another worker doing a job. She listened to their conversations as she worked. They talked about buying new houses, taking trips to faraway countries, and spending money like it was nothing. One woman complained that her new car was the wrong color. A man talked about buying a boat that cost more than most people make in their whole lives. Maya felt like she was from a different world. These people had everything they wanted while Maya worked 3 jobs just to pay for food and rent. They spent more money on one dinner than Maya's family made in a month. Mr. Richard Blackstone stood in the center of the room, telling everyone about his latest business success. He was a short man with gray hair and cold blue eyes. He wore an expensive suit and a gold watch that caught the light when he moved his hands. Everyone listened to him and laughed at his jokes, even when they were not funny. "This new company will make me even richer," Blackstone said loudly. "And the best part is, I bought it for half of what it was worth." The old owner had no idea what he was giving up. The guests laughed and clapped. Maya thought about how many people probably lost their jobs when Blackstone bought the company. But she kept serving drinks and stayed quiet. As the evening went on, Maya's feet hurt more and more. She had been walking around for 3 hours, carrying heavy trays. Her back ached from bending over to serve people, but she did not complain. She needed this job too much. During a quiet moment, Maya found herself standing near the piano again. Without thinking, her right hand moved like she was playing a song. Her fingers remembered the music even though no sound came out. For just a moment she forgot where she was and remembered how much she loved playing. "Get back to work," Susan whispered, appearing next to Maya. "Mr. Blackstone does not like workers standing around." Maya quickly picked up another tray and continued serving. But she could not stop thinking about the piano and the music she used to play. She wondered if she would ever get the chance to play again, or if her dreams of being a musician were over forever. The party continued around her, full of rich people celebrating their good fortune, while Maya worked hard for money that would barely pay her bills. She had no idea that before the night was over, everything in her life would change because of the beautiful piano sitting quietly in the corner. The dinner bell rang at 8 o'clock. Maya and the other servers began moving the guests from the main room to the dining room. The dining room was just as fancy as the rest of the house. A long table made of dark wood sat in the center, covered with white cloth that looked softer than silk. Golden plates and crystal glasses were set perfectly at each seat. Fresh flowers that smelled like spring decorated the table. Maya's job was to serve the wine during dinner. She carried a heavy bottle of red wine that cost more than she made in a week. The bottle felt slippery in her nervous hands. She had practiced opening wine bottles at home, but these bottles were different. They were older and more expensive than anything she had ever touched. The guests sat down and began eating their first course. Maya moved carefully around the table, filling wine glasses. She tried to stay calm, but her hands shook a little. These people made her nervous. They looked at her like she was not really a person, just a tool to bring them food and drinks. Mr. Blackstone sat at the head of the table, talking loudly about his business deals. He seemed to enjoy being the center of attention. Every few minutes he would tell another story about how smart he was or how much money he made. The other guests laughed and agreed with everything he said. "The secret to success," Blackstone announced, "is knowing that some people are winners and some people are losers. Winners take what they want. Losers serve winners." He looked around the table with a satisfied smile. Maya tried not to listen as she continued serving wine. She focused on pouring the wine slowly and carefully, but as she moved around the table, she heard more of Blackstone's cruel words. "Look at the help tonight," he said, waving his hand toward Maya and the other servers. "They work hard, but they will never have what we have. They were born to serve people like us." Some guests looked uncomfortable, but no one said anything to disagree with him. Maya felt her face get hot with anger and shame. She wanted to say something back, but she knew she would lose her job. She needed the money too much to speak up. Maya continued working, trying to ignore Blackstone's mean comments. She was doing well until she reached the chair where Mrs. Henderson was sitting. Mrs. Henderson was an older woman wearing a dress covered in diamonds. She had moved her chair back from the table while Maya was not looking. As Maya stepped forward to fill Mrs. Henderson's wine glass, she did not see that the chair was in a different place. Her leg hit the chair and she stumbled forward. The wine bottle tilted in her hands. A small amount of red wine splashed out and landed on the white tablecloth near Mrs. Henderson's plate. The dining room became completely quiet. Everyone stopped, talking, and looked at the small red stain on the perfect white cloth. Maya felt her heart stop beating. She had made the exact mistake that Susan had warned her about. "I am so sorry," Maya said quickly. "Let me clean that up right away." But before she could move, Mr. Blackstone's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "What did you just do?" Blackstone stood up from his chair, his face red with anger. "Did you just spill wine on my table?" "It was an accident, sir." "I can clean it up," Maya said, her voice shaking. "An accident?" Blackstone laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. "Do you know how much this tablecloth costs? Do you know how much this dinner costs? And you just ruined it with your clumsiness." Maya felt tears starting in her eyes, but she tried to stay strong. "I am very sorry, Mr. Blackstone. Please let me fix it." But Blackstone was not finished. He walked around the table toward Maya, his voice getting louder with each word. "This is exactly what I was talking about. Some people just do not have what it takes. Some people are born to make mistakes and mess things up for their betters." The other guests watched in uncomfortable silence. Some looked down at their plates, not wanting to see what was happening. Others stared like they were watching a show. No one tried to help Maya or tell Blackstone to stop. "You are clumsy and unprofessional," Blackstone continued. "I bet you think you are better than this job. I bet you think you deserve more than serving people like us." Maya's face burned with shame. She wanted to run away, but her feet felt frozen to the floor. She had never been so embarrassed in her whole life. "I bet you think you are educated and cultured," Blackstone said, his voice full of mean laughter. "I bet you think you have talents that make you special." Then Blackstone's eyes moved to the doorway that led back to the main room. Through the open door he could see the black piano sitting in the corner. A cruel smile spread across his face as an idea came to him. "You know what?" Blackstone said, turning back to his guests. "I think our little waitress here needs to show us just how talented she really is." The guests looked confused. They did not understand what Blackstone was planning. "I have a beautiful piano in the other room," Blackstone announced. "I bet our server here thinks she can play it. Why do not we find out? Why do not you go play us a song and show us what a real artist looks like?" Maya felt the blood drain from her face. She understood now what Blackstone was doing. He wanted to embarrass her even more. He thought she could not play piano, and he wanted to make her look foolish in front of all these rich people. I should continue serving dinner," Maya said quietly. "Oh no," Blackstone said, shaking his head. "I insist. We all want to hear your musical talents. Right, everyone?" Some of the guests nodded, though they looked uncomfortable. Others just stared. Maya realized that this was entertainment for them. They wanted to see what would happen to the poor waitress who had spilled wine. "Come now, do not be modest," Blackstone continued. "I am sure you have had lessons like all the other help who are trying to better themselves. Show us what community, college music class sounds like." Maya looked around the room desperately. The other servers would not meet her eyes. They felt sorry for her, but they could not help without risking their own jobs. Susan stood near the kitchen door, her face full of worry, but she could not say anything to one of the most important clients. Maya knew she had no choice. If she refused to play, Blackstone would fire her for sure. She needed this job and the money it would bring. Her family was counting on her. Her dreams of finishing music school depended on earning money tonight. "Please, sir," Maya said one more time. "I really should finish serving dinner." "The dinner can wait," Blackstone said firmly. "Right now, I want to hear you play piano. We all do. Do not disappoint us." Maya set down the wine bottle with shaking hands. She felt like she was walking to her execution as she moved toward the door leading to the main room. Behind her, she could hear Blackstone talking to his guests. "This should be amusing," he said. "These people always think they are more talented than they really are. She probably cannot even read music." The guests began to follow Maya and Blackstone into the main room. They formed a circle around the piano like an audience waiting for a show to begin. Maya could feel their eyes on her as she walked slowly toward the black Steinway. Her legs felt weak as she approached the piano bench. The beautiful instrument that had made her so happy to see earlier now felt like a trap. Blackstone expected her to embarrass herself. He wanted her to fail so he could laugh at her and feel superior. Maya sat down on the piano bench and looked at the keys. They were perfect and white, just waiting for someone to bring them to life. Her hands rested on her knees, shaking slightly. She could hear Blackstone behind her, making more cruel comments to entertain his friends. "Let us see what our little artist can do," he said with a laugh. "I hope you all prepared for something truly special." Maya closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had to play something, but what? She could play a simple song and get it over with quickly. That would be the safe choice. Blackstone would laugh at her, but at least she would not risk making a bigger mistake. But as she sat there, feeling the weight of everyone's stare, something deep inside Maya began to change. She was tired of being treated like she was nothing. She was tired of people like Blackstone thinking they were better than everyone else. She was tired of hiding who she really was. Maya opened her eyes and looked at the piano keys. These people thought she was just a clumsy waitress who could not do anything right. They had no idea who she really was or what she could do. Maybe it was time to show them. She placed her fingers on the keys and made a decision that would change everything. Maya sat at the piano bench surrounded by 60 of the richest people in the city. They stood in a circle around her, some holding wine glasses, others with their arms crossed. The silence in the room felt heavy and dangerous. Maya could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Behind her, Mr. Blackstone continued talking to his guests like Maya was not even there. "I love when the help tries to pretend they have culture," he said with a laugh. "It is always so entertaining to watch them fail." A few guests laughed along with him, but Maya noticed that some people looked uncomfortable. An older woman near the window frowned and shook her head slightly. A younger man in an expensive suit looked down at his shoes like he was ashamed. But no one spoke up to defend Maya. Maya's hands rested on the piano keys, but she felt frozen. She had played piano for 18 years since she was 5 years old. She had won competitions and earned scholarships. She had performed in front of hundreds of people before, but she had never felt pressure like this. This was not about music. This was about power and cruelty. Blackstone did not want to hear her play because he loved music. He wanted to watch her fail so he could feel superior. He wanted to prove to everyone that people like Maya did not deserve respect. "Any time now," Blackstone said, his voice sharp with impatience. "We are all waiting to hear your amazing talents." Maya tried to think of what to play. She could choose something simple like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star or Happy Birthday. That would be safe. She would play it quickly, and everyone would laugh at her like Blackstone wanted. Then this nightmare would be over. But even if she played something simple, what would happen next? Blackstone would make more cruel jokes. He would tell everyone how pathetic she was. The other guests would laugh and feel good about themselves for being better than a poor waitress. Maya would finish the evening serving them food while they whispered about her embarrassing performance. Maya felt anger building in her chest. These people had everything they could ever want, but it was not enough for them. They also needed to hurt people who had less than them. They needed to make others feel small so they could feel big. "Maybe she cannot actually play," someone whispered behind her. "I told you," Blackstone replied loudly. "These people always think they are more talented than they really are. She probably lied on her job application about having music experience." Maya closed her eyes and thought about her grandmother, who had first taught her to play piano. Her grandmother had been a poor woman who cleaned houses for rich families. But when she sat at the piano, she became something more. She became an artist who could create beauty in an ugly world. "Music is not about having money," her grandmother had told Maya. "Music is about having soul, and soul is something you cannot buy." Maya thought about all the hours she had practiced, all the sacrifices she had made to study music. She thought about her dreams of playing in concert halls and sharing beautiful music with the world. She thought about how much she loved the feeling of music flowing through her fingers and into the air. Then she thought about why she was here tonight. Her mother was sick and needed expensive medicine. Maya had left music school to work 3 jobs and help pay the bills. She was exhausted and heartbroken, but she had not given up. She was still fighting to find a way back to her dreams. "We do not have all night," Blackstone said. "Either play something or admit that you cannot do it." Maya opened her eyes and looked at the piano keys. The beautiful black and white keys seemed to call to her like old friends. This might be the last time she ever got to touch a piano this beautiful. After tonight, she would go back to her 3 jobs and her tiny apartment. With no piano, she might never get another chance to play music again. If this was going to be her last performance, Maya decided she was not going to waste it on Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Maya took a deep breath and placed her hands properly on the keys. She could feel the smooth ivory under her fingertips. The piano was perfectly tuned, better than any instrument she had ever played. Despite everything that was happening, she felt a familiar excitement building inside her. "Finally," Blackstone said. "Let us get this over with so we can go back to dinner." Maya ignored him. She closed her eyes again and let herself remember what it felt like to really play music. Not just pressing keys to make sounds, but creating something beautiful and meaningful. Something that came from her heart and soul. She thought about Chopin, her favorite composer. Frédéric Chopin had written some of the most beautiful piano music ever created. His pieces were difficult and emotional, full of passion and pain and hope. Maya had been studying Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor for 2 years before she had to leave school. The ballad was one of the hardest pieces in classical music. It required perfect technique and deep emotional understanding. Most pianists spent years learning to play it well. It was not the kind of piece that a community college music student would know, as Blackstone had put it. Maya smiled to herself. If these people wanted to hear her play, she would give them something they would never forget. She positioned her hands over the keys for the opening of Chopin's Ballade No. 1. Her left hand prepared for the soft, haunting melody that would begin the piece. Her right hand got ready for the delicate harmonies that would support it. Behind her, Maya could hear the guests getting impatient. Someone coughed. Ice clinked in a glass. A woman whispered something to her husband. "This is ridiculous," Blackstone said. "She is just sitting there like she knows what she is doing. Play something or get back to work." Maya took one more deep breath. She thought about her grandmother's words. Music is about having soul. These people could take away her job, her dignity, and her dreams. But they could not take away her soul. They could not take away the music that lived inside her. Maya pressed. The first key and the opening note of Chopin's ballade floated into the air like a prayer. The note was perfect, pure and clear and full of emotion. It hung in the air for a moment before Maya played the second note, then the third. The melody began to unfold, soft and mysterious and heartbreakingly beautiful. The room became completely silent. No one coughed or whispered or moved. Everyone stopped what they were doing and listened to the unexpected beauty filling the air. Maya continued playing, her eyes still closed, lost in the music. Each note flowed into the next like water, creating a melody that seemed to come from another world. Her fingers moved with perfect precision, finding each key without hesitation. Behind her, Blackstone's cruel smile began to fade. This was not what he had expected. This was not the embarrassing failure he had planned to watch. This was something else entirely. The other guests stood frozen, their wine glasses forgotten in their hands. They had come to watch a poor waitress make a fool of herself. Instead, they were hearing music more beautiful than anything they had ever experienced. Maya played on, unaware of the shock and amazement spreading through the room. She was no longer a waitress being humiliated at a rich man's party. She was a musician sharing her soul with the world, one perfect note at a time. The opening notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 filled the mansion like gentle rain falling on a quiet lake. Maya's fingers moved across the keys with the grace of a dancer, each note perfect and purposeful. The melody was soft at first, almost like a whisper, but it carried such beauty that everyone in the room felt their breath catch. Maya kept her eyes closed as she played. In her mind, she was no longer in Richard Blackstone's dining room surrounded by cruel, wealthy people. She was back, at music school, practicing in the small room with the old piano where she had spent countless hours perfecting this piece. She could almost hear her teacher, Professor Martinez, giving her guidance. "Feel the music, Maya," Professor Martinez had always said. "Do not just play the notes. Tell a story with your heart." And that is exactly what Maya was doing now. The opening melody of the ballade told the story of longing and hope. It spoke of dreams that seemed impossible but refused to die. It was the perfect piece for this moment, because it was Maya's own story flowing through her fingers. Behind her, the guests stood in complete silence. Mr. Blackstone's mouth had fallen open in shock. He had expected to hear stumbling, amateur, playing that would make everyone laugh. Instead, he was hearing music that belonged in the world's finest concert halls. Mrs. Henderson, the woman whose chair Maya had bumped into earlier, felt tears forming in her eyes. She had attended hundreds of classical music concerts in her life, but she had never heard Chopin played with such emotion and skill. The young waitress was not just playing the notes correctly, she was bringing the music to life. The melody continued to develop, growing slightly more complex as Maya moved into the second section of the piece. Her left hand provided a gentle bass line while her right hand danced through increasingly difficult passages. Every note was crystal clear, every phrase perfectly shaped. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood near the back of the room, her eyes wide with amazement. As a professor at Juilliard School of Music and one of the most respected music critics in the country, she knew immediately that she was witnessing something extraordinary. This level of playing did not come from casual lessons or natural talent alone. This required years of serious training and countless hours of practice. Maya moved into the third section of the ballade, where the music became more passionate and urgent. Her fingers flew across the keys in rapid scales and arpeggios that most amateur pianists could never dream of playing. But Maya made it look effortless, her hands moving with the confidence of someone who had mastered every note. The guests began to look at each other with expressions of disbelief. They had come to watch a waitress embarrass herself, but instead they were hearing a performance that rivaled anything they had heard at Lincoln Center or Carnegie Hall. James Morrison, a famous businessman who owned several art galleries, shook his head in wonder. He had paid thousands of dollars to hear world-renowned pianists play this same piece, but none of them had moved him the way this young woman was moving him now. There was something raw and honest about her playing that made the music feel more real, more alive. Maya continued playing, completely unaware of the effect she was having on her audience. She was lost in the world of Chopin's music, where every note had meaning and every phrase told part of a larger story. This was why she had fallen in love with music in the first place. This feeling of connection, of being able to speak without words and touch people's hearts through sound. The ballade moved into its most technically challenging section, where rapid octaves and complex harmonies tested the limits of even professional pianists. Maya's training took over completely now. Her fingers had memorized every movement through years of repetition. Her muscles knew exactly how much pressure to apply to each key, exactly how to shape each phrase for maximum emotional impact. Blackstone stood frozen behind her, his face pale with shock. He had intended to humiliate this young woman, to prove his superiority over someone he considered beneath him. But with every note she played, Maya was proving that true worth had nothing to do with money or social status. She was showing everyone in the room what real excellence looked like. The music built to its first major climax with Maya's hands moving in perfect coordination to create layers of sound that seemed impossible for one person to produce. The melody soared above a complex accompaniment, creating moments of such beauty that several guests felt chills running down their spines. Susan, the head server, watched from the doorway with tears streaming down her face. She had worked for elite events for 15 years, serving at hundreds of parties for wealthy clients. She had seen every form of entertainment imaginable, but she had never seen anything like this. The young woman she had trained just hours ago was revealing herself to be an artist of extraordinary talent. Maya played on, her entire being focused on the music. She had forgotten about spilling the wine, forgotten about Blackstone's cruel, Words, forgotten about her embarrassment and fear. There was only the music now, flowing through her like a river of pure emotion. The other catering staff had stopped their work and gathered in doorways to listen. Word had spread quickly through the kitchen that something amazing was happening in the main room. Even the chef, who had been preparing dessert, stood with his hands still covered in flour, completely captivated by the sounds coming from the piano. As Maya moved through the middle sections of the ballade, the music told stories of struggle and triumph, of dreams deferred but not destroyed. It spoke of the human spirit's ability to find beauty even in the darkest circumstances. Every person in the room could hear their own hopes and fears reflected in the music. Dr. Vasquez stepped closer, her trained ear catching subtleties in Maya's interpretation that most people would miss. The young woman was not just playing the notes perfectly. She was making artistic choices that showed deep understanding of the music's structure and meaning. This was not the playing of a student or amateur. This was the work of a serious artist. The ballade continued to unfold, building toward its dramatic conclusion. Maya's technique was flawless, but more importantly, her musical soul was completely engaged. She played with the passion of someone who knew that music was not just a hobby or skill, but a calling, a way of speaking to the world about things too deep for ordinary words. Behind her, the room full of wealthy, powerful people stood in stunned silence. They had thought they knew what excellence looked like. They believed that money and status were the measures of a person's worth. But this young waitress, whom they had dismissed as unimportant, was showing them a kind of greatness they had never imagined. The music was approaching its final, most challenging section. Maya's hands prepared for the rapid passages and complex harmonies that would bring Chopin's masterpiece to its stunning conclusion. She took a barely noticeable breath and dove into the music's final movement, ready to share the most beautiful part of her soul with a room full of strangers who had underestimated her so completely. As Maya entered the final section of Chopin's Ballade No. 1, something magical happened in the Blackstone mansion. The music seemed to transform not just Maya herself, but everyone in the room. What had started as a cruel joke was becoming something sacred, something that none of them would ever forget. Maya's fingers moved with incredible speed and precision through the most difficult passages of the piece. Years of training had prepared her muscles to handle these challenging runs and complex chord progressions. But it was more than just technique now. The music was flowing through her like electricity, connecting her to something larger than herself. Her nervousness had completely disappeared. The shaking in her hands was gone, replaced by steady confidence born from thousands of hours of practice. Maya was no longer the frightened waitress who had spilled wine on an expensive tablecloth. She had become what she truly was, a gifted musician sharing her art with the world. The transformation was visible on her face. Her expression had changed from fear and embarrassment to peaceful concentration and joy. Her eyes remained closed, but there was a small smile on her lips as she navigated through Chopin's intricate musical landscape. She looked like someone who had come home after a long journey. Behind her, the 60 guests stood transfixed. Many of them had attended opera performances, symphony concerts, and recitals by world-famous musicians. They thought they knew what good music sounded like, but Maya's playing was touching them in ways they had never experienced before. Mrs. Patricia Wilson, who owned several art galleries and considered herself an expert on culture, felt tears rolling down her cheeks. She had spent millions of dollars on paintings and sculptures, but nothing she owned had ever moved her the way this music was moving her now. The raw emotion in Maya's playing made her think about her own lost dreams, the poetry she had wanted to write when she was young, before wealth and social obligations took over her life. Dr. Elena Vasquez listened with the trained ear of a professional, musician, and critic. She recognized not just the technical perfection of Maya's playing, but the deep musical intelligence behind it. The way Maya shaped each phrase, the subtle timing choices she made, the emotional arc she was creating, these were the marks of a truly gifted artist. As Maya played, Dr. Vasquez began to remember something. 3 years ago, she had been a judge at the International Young Artist Competition. one of the most prestigious piano competitions in the world. A young woman had performed this same ballade with an interpretation so moving that it had brought the entire audience to tears. The girl had won first place, but then she had mysteriously disappeared from the competition circuit. Dr. Vasquez studied Maya's profile as she played, and recognition began to dawn. Could this be the same young woman? The girl who had vanished from the classical music world just when everyone expected her to become a major star. Meanwhile, Maya continued through the ballade's most challenging passages. The music demanded everything from her: perfect timing, flawless technique, and complete emotional commitment. But instead of feeling tired or stressed, Maya felt more alive than she had in months. This was who she really was. Not a waitress struggling to pay bills, but an artist with something important to say. The melody soared and dipped, telling stories of love and loss, hope and despair, triumph and tragedy. Maya's interpretation brought out every nuance of Chopin's genius, revealing layers of meaning that many listeners had never heard before. She played with the wisdom of someone who had experienced real hardship, who understood what it meant to have dreams and watch them slip away. James Morrison, the gallery owner, found himself thinking about his own son, who had wanted to be a musician but had been pressured into studying business instead. As he listened to Maya's passionate playing, he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake in discouraging his son's artistic dreams. This young woman was proving that art was not just a hobby for rich people to collect, but a vital force that could change lives. Even the catering staff had stopped working completely. They stood in doorways and gathered at the edges of the room, mesmerized by the music. Many of them worked multiple jobs just like Maya, struggling to make ends meet while dreaming of something better. Her playing spoke to their own hopes and struggles in a way that made them feel less alone. Maya reached the climactic section of the ballad, where all the musical themes came together in a moment of overwhelming beauty and power. Her hands moved across the keyboard with the grace of a dancer and the precision of a surgeon. Every note rang out clear and true, building to a crescendo that seemed to shake the very foundations of the mansion. Blackstone himself stood in stunned silence, his face drained of color. The cruel smile that had been on his lips minutes earlier had vanished completely. He had thought he was watching a servant pretend to have culture and talent. Instead, he was witnessing a display of artistic mastery that made his own accomplishments seem small and meaningless. For the first time in his life, Richard Blackstone was face to face with something that his money could not buy. He could purchase expensive paintings and sculptures. He could hire famous musicians to perform at his parties. But he could never buy the kind of soul and passion that was flowing from Maya's fingers. He could never purchase the years of dedication and sacrifice that had created this moment of perfect beauty. The music continued to build, with Maya's interpretation bringing out colors and emotions that seemed to paint pictures in the air. Some listeners saw images of stormy seas and peaceful meadows. Others felt memories of their first love or the loss of someone dear to them. The music spoke to each person differently, but it spoke to all of them deeply. As the ballad approached, its final, most dramatic section, Maya's playing took on an almost supernatural quality. Her technique was so perfect that the difficulty of the music seemed to disappear. Complex passages that normally required intense concentration flowed from her fingers as naturally as breathing. She had transcended the mechanical act of pressing keys and had become a conduit for pure musical expression. The transformation was complete. Maya had started the evening as an invisible servant, someone to be ignored or mocked. But through the power of her art, she had become the most important person in the room. Every eye was fixed on her. Every ear was tuned to the music she was creating. Every heart was moved by the beauty she was sharing. Dr. Vasquez felt certain now that this was the same young woman from the competition 3 years ago. The technique was unmistakable, but more than that, the musical personality was identical. This was Maya Chen, the prodigy who had disappeared from the classical music world. But what was she doing serving drinks at a millionaire's party? As Maya prepared for the ballade's stunning conclusion, the room held its collective breath. No one wanted this moment to end. They had come to a party expecting food, wine, and shallow conversation. Instead, they had been given something precious and rare, a glimpse of true artistic greatness, performed by someone they had completely underestimated. The music was about to reach its final, earth-shattering climax, and everyone in the room knew they were about to witness something they would remember for the rest of their lives. Dr. Elena Vasquez stepped closer to the piano, her heart racing with excitement and disbelief. As one of the most respected music critics in the country and a professor at the prestigious Juilliard School, she had heard thousands of pianists perform over her 30-year career. But the young woman playing Chopin's Ballade with such extraordinary skill was triggering a very specific memory. 3 years ago, Dr. Vasquez had served as a judge at the International Young Artist Competition in New York City. The competition attracted the most talented young pianists from around the world, all hoping to launch their professional careers. That year, a 20-year-old girl named Maya Chen had performed this exact piece, Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. Dr. Vasquez remembered that performance vividly because it had been unlike anything she had ever heard. Maya Chen had played with such maturity and emotional depth that the entire audience had been moved to tears. Her technical skills were flawless, but more importantly, she had brought a rare combination of passion and intelligence to the music that marked her as a true artist. Maya Chen had won first place in the competition unanimously. All 5 judges had agreed that they had witnessed something special, something that happened maybe once in a generation. The classical music world had been buzzing with excitement about this new star who seemed destined for greatness. But then, mysteriously, Maya Chen had disappeared. She had not entered any other competitions. She had not given any recitals. She had not signed with any management companies or record labels. It was as if she had vanished from the music world completely, leaving everyone wondering what had happened to the most promising young pianist they had ever heard. Now, as Dr. Vasquez listened to the Waitress play the same piece with the same incredible skill and identical interpretation, she felt certain she had found the missing prodigy. But what was Maya Chen doing serving drinks at a wealthy man's party instead of performing in concert halls around the world? Dr. Vasquez studied Maya's profile as she played. Yes, it was definitely the same young woman. The shape of her face, the way she held her shoulders, the elegant curve of her hands as they moved across the keyboard. Everything matched her memories of the competition winner 3 years ago. But Maya looked different now. Thinner, more tired, with worry lines around her eyes that had not been there when she was a carefree music student. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of the elegant style she had worn at the competition. She wore the plain, black and white uniform of a catering worker, instead of the beautiful concert dress that had made her shine on stage. Dr. Vasquez felt her heart break as she realized what must have happened. Something had forced this incredibly talented young woman to leave the music world behind. Financial problems, family emergencies, or other personal crises had stolen away one of the most promising careers in classical music. As Maya played through the most challenging passages of the ballade, Dr. Vasquez marveled at how perfectly she had maintained her skills, despite being away from professional music for 3 years. Most pianists would have lost some of their technique after such a long break, but Maya's playing was as flawless as ever, perhaps even more emotionally mature than it had been during the competition. The other guests in the room had no idea they were witnessing the return of a missing star. To them, Maya was just a waitress, who happened to play piano surprisingly well. But Dr. Vasquez understood the true magnitude of what was happening. This was like discovering that your house cleaner was actually a famous painter, or that your taxi driver was secretly a Nobel Prize winner. Dr. Vasquez began to feel angry at Richard Blackstone for the way he had treated Maya. If he had known who she really was, would he have been so cruel? Probably not. But that made his behavior even worse because it meant he only treated people with respect if he thought they were important. He had no basic human decency toward people he considered beneath him. Maya continued playing, completely unaware that she had been recognized. She was lost in the music, reliving the joy she had felt during her competition days when the future had seemed full of endless possibilities. For these few minutes, she could forget about her current struggles and remember what it felt like to be a serious artist with dreams of greatness. Dr. Vasquez noticed other details that confirmed Maya's identity. The way she pedaled the piano to create perfect smooth connections between notes, the slight forward lean of her body during emotional passages, the tiny pause she made before beginning each new section, a personal habit that Dr. Vasquez remembered from the competition. But most convincing of all was Maya's musical interpretation. Every pianist played the notes differently, making personal choices about timing, dynamics, and phrasing that were like musical fingerprints. Maya's interpretation of the ballade was identical to the one that had won the competition 3 years ago. The same subtle rubato, the same careful balance between technical precision and emotional expression, the same understanding of Chopin's genius. As Maya moved toward the piece's dramatic climax, Dr. Vasquez made a decision. She could not let this talented young woman disappear again. Whatever circumstances had forced Maya to leave the music world, Dr. Vasquez was going to help her find her way back. The classical music community had lost too much when Maya Chen vanished. They could not afford to lose her again. Dr. Vasquez began planning what she would say to Maya after the performance ended. She would need to be careful and sensitive. Maya might be embarrassed about her current situation. She might not want to talk about why she had left music behind. But Dr. Vasquez was determined to help, no matter what obstacles stood in the way. Around the room, other guests were having their own moments of recognition, not of Maya's identity but of their own prejudices and assumptions. They had looked at a young woman in a server's uniform and immediately decided she was unimportant, uneducated, and untalented. Now they were forced to confront how wrong they had been. Mrs. Henderson, who had barely acknowledged Maya when she spilled the wine, now felt ashamed of her dismissive attitude. How many other people had she misjudged based on their appearance or job? How much beauty and talent had she missed because she only paid attention to people who seemed wealthy or important? James Morrison, the gallery owner, was thinking about all the struggling artists he had turned away from his galleries because they could not afford his high prices or did not have the right connections. How many brilliant artists had he ignored because they did not fit his image of what successful people looked like? Even some of Blackstone's business associates were beginning to feel uncomfortable about their host's behavior. They had laughed, along with his cruel jokes because they wanted to stay in his good graces. But watching Maya's graceful response to his cruelty made them question their own moral choices. Maya herself remained focused entirely on the music, unaware of the profound impact she was having on everyone around her. She was approaching the most challenging and beautiful section of the ballade, where Chopin's genius reached its peak. Her fingers prepared for the rapid scales and complex harmonies that would bring the piece to its stunning conclusion. Dr. Vasquez watched with anticipation, knowing that Maya was about to demonstrate why she had been considered one of the most promising young pianists in the world. The next few minutes would prove beyond any doubt that the missing competition winner had been found, and that her talent had only grown stronger during her years away from the spotlight. The room held its breath as Maya prepared to deliver the musical performance of a lifetime, one that would change everything for everyone present, especially for Maya herself. Maya's hands moved across the keyboard like lightning as she entered the final, most spectacular section of Chopin's Ballade No. 1. This was the moment that separated true artists from ordinary players. The climactic passage where technical perfection had to combine with deep emotional understanding to create something transcendent. Her fingers flew through rapid scales that cascaded like waterfalls, each note crystal clear despite the incredible speed. The melody soared above the accompaniment, telling the story of a soul that refused to be broken despite facing overwhelming challenges. It was the perfect musical expression of Maya's own journey, a talented young woman who had faced hardship but had not lost her ability to create beauty. The room was completely silent except for the magnificent sounds coming from the piano. Even the air seemed to hold still as if the entire mansion was holding its breath. The crystal chandelier above seemed to sparkle more brightly, as if the music was bringing light to every corner of the grand room. Maya's technique was flawless, but it was her emotional connection to the music that made the performance truly extraordinary. She played with the passion of someone who understood what it meant to have dreams, to lose them, and to fight to get them back. Every note carried the weight of her own experiences, the joy of discovering her gift, the pain of having to give it up, and the hope that someday she might return to the world where she truly belonged. Mrs. Patricia Wilson stood transfixed, tears streaming down her face. She had attended hundreds of concerts in her life, but she had never heard anything like this. The young woman's playing was reaching places in her heart that she had forgotten existed. For the first time in years, Mrs. Wilson remembered what it felt like to be truly moved by art. Behind Maya, Richard Blackstone's face had gone completely white. The cruel satisfaction he had felt just minutes earlier had been replaced by something he rarely experienced: shame. He had intended to humiliate this young woman, to prove his superiority over someone he considered beneath him. Instead, she was showing him and everyone else what real greatness looked like. Maya reached the most technically demanding passage of the entire piece, where both hands had to work in perfect coordination to create layers of sound that seemed impossible for one person to produce. Her left hand provided a thunderous bass line while her right hand danced through intricate melodies in the upper register. The music built to a crescendo that seemed to shake the very walls of the mansion. Dr. Elena Vasquez watched with professional amazement as Maya navigated these treacherous musical waters with the skill of a master. This was not just good playing, this was artistry of the highest level. The way Maya controlled the dynamic range, building from whisper-soft passages to moments of overwhelming power, showed a musical maturity that took most pianists decades to develop. As the music swelled to its climactic moment, something magical happened in the room. The artificial barriers between the wealthy guests and the working staff seemed to dissolve. Everyone present, from millionaire businessmen to kitchen workers, was united in their awe at what they were witnessing. Maya's music spoke a universal language that transcended social class and economic status. James Morrison felt as if he was seeing color for the first time. As someone who made his living buying and selling art, he thought he understood beauty. But Maya's performance was teaching him that true art was not something you could own or trade. It was something that existed in moments like this, when a gifted artist shared their soul with the world. The catering staff had completely abandoned their duties and gathered at the edges of the room to listen. Susan, the head server, wiped tears from her eyes as she watched the young woman she had trained just hours earlier reveal herself to be an artist of extraordinary gifts. She thought about all the talented people she had met over the years who were working ordinary jobs while harboring extraordinary dreams. Maya's playing continued to build in intensity and complexity. The music told stories of struggle and triumph, of love and loss, of dreams that seemed impossible but refused to die. Her interpretation brought out every nuance of Chopin's genius, revealing layers of meaning that many listeners had never heard before. The ballade reached its final, most dramatic section, where all the musical themes came together in a moment of overwhelming beauty and resolution. Maya's hands moved with supernatural grace and precision, creating sounds that seemed to come from heaven itself. The melody soared above complex harmonies, painting pictures in the air that made everyone present feel as if they were witnessing something sacred. Even the most cynical guests found themselves deeply moved. Men who spent their days making cold business calculations felt tears in their eyes. Women who lived lives of careful social positioning forgot about appearances and allowed themselves to be touched by pure emotion. Maya's music was breaking down the walls that people built around their hearts. As the piece moved toward its conclusion, Maya poured everything she had into the performance. This might be the last time she ever played a piano this beautiful. This might be her final chance to share her gift with an audience. She played with the intensity of someone who knew that this moment might have to last her a lifetime. The music, built to its ultimate climax, with Maya's hands creating a storm of sound that seemed to contain all the passion and pain and hope of human existence. The room was filled with music so powerful that it seemed to change the very air everyone was breathing. Some guests felt as if they were being lifted off the ground by the sheer force of the beauty surrounding them. Then gradually, the storm began to calm. Maya guided the music toward its peaceful resolution, her touch becoming gentle and tender. The final notes floated through the air like prayers, carrying with them all the emotion that had been building throughout the entire performance. When Maya played the last soft note of the ballade, the sound seemed to hang in the air forever. The room remained completely silent for what felt like an eternity, as if no one wanted to break the spell that had been cast by her extraordinary performance. Then, suddenly, the silence was broken by the sound of hands clapping. Dr. Elena Vasquez had begun to applaud, and she was quickly joined by others. But this was not ordinary applause. This was the kind of ovation that happens maybe once in a lifetime, when an audience knows they have witnessed something truly miraculous. The applause grew louder and more enthusiastic as more people joined in. Soon the entire room was clapping, with an intensity that shook the crystal chandelier above. Several guests were wiping tears from their eyes as they applauded. Others were shaking their heads in amazement, still trying to process what they had just experienced. Maya opened her eyes for the first time since she had begun playing. She looked around the room in surprise, seeing the faces of people who had been transformed by her music. These were the same people who had stood by silently while she was humiliated just minutes earlier. Now they were giving her the kind of ovation usually reserved for the world's greatest artists. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, still applauding enthusiastically. "Brava!" she called out, using the traditional exclamation of approval for exceptional performances. Her voice rang out clear and strong above the continued applause. Maya stood up from the piano bench on shaking legs, overwhelmed by the response to her performance. She had played the ballade to prove to herself that she was still an artist, despite her current circumstances. She had not expected to move an entire room full of strangers to tears. As the applause continued, Maya realized that something fundamental had changed. She was no longer just a waitress who had embarrassed herself at a rich man's party. She had reclaimed her identity as a musician, and everyone in the room now knew exactly who she really was. The applause continued for several minutes, with guests wiping tears from their eyes and shaking their heads in amazement. Maya stood beside the piano, overwhelmed by the response to her performance. She had expected mockery and laughter. Instead, she was receiving the kind of ovation that professional musicians only dreamed of getting. Dr. Elena Vasquez was the first to approach Maya when the applause finally began to fade. She walked directly to the piano, with purpose and determination, her eyes bright with excitement and recognition. "That was absolutely magnificent," Dr. Vasquez said, extending her hand to Maya. "I am Dr. Elena Vasquez, professor of piano at Juilliard School of Music. I believe we have met before, though under very different circumstances." Maya looked confused for a moment, then her eyes widened with recognition. "Dr. Vasquez, you were a judge at the International Young Artist Competition 3 years ago." "Indeed I was," Dr. Vasquez replied with a warm smile. "And you are Maya Chen, the winner of that competition. I have been wondering what happened to you ever since you disappeared from the music world." The other guests listened to this conversation with growing amazement. They were learning that the young woman they had dismissed as an unimportant waitress was actually an internationally recognized musical talent. I had to leave school," Maya said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "My mother became very sick, and we could not afford her medical treatment. I had to quit music and get jobs to help pay for her medicine." Dr. Vasquez felt her heart break as she heard Maya's story. Here was one of the most talented young pianists she had ever encountered, forced to abandon her dreams because of financial hardship. It was exactly the kind of tragedy that happened too often in the music world, where economic circumstances could destroy promising careers. "My dear," Dr. Vasquez said gently, "talent like yours cannot be wasted. What you just played was even more beautiful than your competition performance 3 years ago. You have grown as an artist despite being away from formal training." Maya felt tears forming in her eyes. For 3 years, she had wondered if she would ever be able to return to music. Hearing these words from someone as respected as Dr. Vasquez made her dare to hope again. "I would like to offer you something," Dr. Vasquez continued. Juilliard has a special scholarship program for exceptional students who have faced unusual circumstances. Based on what I just heard, I am prepared to recommend you for a full scholarship to complete your studies with us. Maya's hands flew to her mouth in shock. Are you serious? Do you really mean that? Completely serious, Dr. Vasquez replied. Furthermore, I have connections with several major orchestras and concert venues. I believe I can arrange for you to give some paid performances while you complete your studies. You should be sharing this gift with the world, not hiding it in service jobs. The other guests listened to this conversation with growing shame and admiration. They were witnessing the life-changing moment when a deserving person received the opportunity they had always needed. Meanwhile, Richard Blackstone stood in the background, his face pale and drawn. He had watched Maya's extraordinary performance with a mixture of awe and horror. Awe at her incredible talent, and horror at his own behavior. He had tried to humiliate someone who turned out to be more accomplished than anyone in the room, including himself. Blackstone approached Maya and Dr. Vasquez hesitantly. When he spoke, his voice was much quieter and more humble than it had been earlier in the evening. Miss Chen, he said, I owe you a sincere apology. My behavior tonight was inexcusable. I made assumptions about you based on your job, and I treated you with cruelty that you did not deserve. Maya looked at him with surprise. She had not expected an apology from the man who had been so mean to her just an hour earlier. Blackstone reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. I know that an apology is not enough to make up for my actions, he continued. I heard you say that your mother needed expensive medical treatment. This envelope contains a check that should cover those costs, and more. Maya stared at the envelope, in disbelief. Mr. Blackstone, I cannot accept that. It is too much. Please take it, Blackstone insisted. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But you have something I could never buy. Real talent and the ability to create beauty. Consider this a small investment in ensuring that your gift is not lost to the world. Dr. Vasquez nodded approvingly. Mr. Blackstone is right, Maya. Your talent is too valuable to be wasted on financial concerns. Take the help that is being offered and use it to pursue your dreams. Maya accepted the envelope with shaking hands, still hardly believing what was happening. In the space of one evening, she had gone from being a struggling waitress to having her education paid for and her family's medical bills covered. Mrs. Patricia Wilson approached the group, her eyes still red from crying during Maya's performance. Miss Chen, I run a foundation that supports young artists. I would like to discuss ways we might be able to help you as well. What you shared with us tonight was more valuable than any painting in my collection. Soon, Maya was surrounded by guests who wanted to help her in various ways. James Morrison offered to organize a fundraising concert for her. Another guest, who owned a music store, offered to provide her with a piano to practice on. The transformation was complete. The people who had ignored her earlier were now competing to support her dreams. Susan, the head server, watched from the doorway with tears of joy streaming down her face. She had spent her career serving wealthy people at their parties, but she had never seen anything as beautiful as what was happening now. A deserving person was finally getting the recognition and support she needed. As the evening wound down, Maya found herself sitting at the piano again, but this time she was surrounded by people who appreciated her talent. Dr. Vasquez was discussing course schedules and practice facilities. Mrs. Wilson was talking about performance opportunities. Several other guests were exchanging contact information, all wanting to stay connected with Maya's musical journey. Maya looked around the room at all these people who wanted to help her, and she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Just a few hours earlier, she had been a nameless server worried about paying her bills. Now she had a full scholarship to one of the world's best music schools, enough money to take care of her family, and a network of supporters who believed in her talent. But, more than the practical help, Maya felt something even more valuable. She had reclaimed her identity as an artist. For 3 years, she had felt like she was living someone else's life, working jobs that had nothing to do with her true calling. Tonight, she had remembered who she really was and what she was meant to do with her life. as Maya prepared to leave the mansion. Dr. Vasquez handed her a business card. "Call me tomorrow," she said. "We have a lot of work to do to get you enrolled for the spring semester, but I promise you your struggling days are over. The music world has missed you, Maya Chen, and it is time for your return." Maya walked out of the Blackstone mansion with her head held high, no longer the invisible waitress who had entered through the service entrance hours earlier. She was Maya Chen, the pianist, ready to reclaim her place in the world where she belonged. Behind her, the guests continued to talk about the extraordinary performance they had witnessed. Many of them would change how they treated service workers from that day forward, having learned that you never know who might be serving your dinner or cleaning your office. Richard Blackstone stood alone in his magnificent music room, looking at the piano where Maya had performed her miracle. For the first time in his life, he understood that true worth had nothing to do with money or social status. It came from having something valuable to offer the world, and the courage to share it even when circumstances seemed impossible. Maya's transformation was complete, but it had transformed everyone else as well. In trying to humiliate a young waitress, Blackstone had inadvertently created a moment of beauty that reminded everyone present what really mattered in life. Maya had left them all speechless, but in the best possible way.